Today's video I'm going to show you how you can create this cool sort of two-tone color effect for a YouTube thumbnail in Photoshop. So I actually got inspired by this by seeing something that I see a lot on the Star Wars Theory channel is this sort of two-tone color effect on these thumbnails. It's extremely striking and eye-grabbing, and it could be something you could use to actually get more eyes onto your thumbnails and get more clicks on your videos. And I want to shout out Star Wars Theory for kind of inspiring this video, because he, as a graphic designer, I can say his thumbnails are really quite good, and that's the reason why he is where he is. And so I've got these three images from Pexels. I've got a picture of a man, I've got this sort of like light effect, and then I've got this background, which I'm going to basically be using in the video. First thing I'm going to do is I've actually got to cut this guy out. Now, there are a few ways we can cut people out. Now, first of all, I want you to note that it's a pretty neutral color. He doesn't have any colors on him, so I'm not trying to cheat my way through this, but when I'm cutting this out, I can go to Select and then to Subject to select him. And if you have trouble with this, I have a full video which shows you how to cut people out with the pen tool. I'll also pop that in the description below so you can learn a more detailed way to cut people out if you're not getting the results you want with Select Subject. But I'm essentially going to then go to Edit and copy this image. I'm going to create a new image, and I'm going to make it 1920 for, this is for the YouTube thumbnail. I'm going to make it 1920 by 1080 and create. And then I'm just going to paste that image in place. So go Edit and Paste. Now it's pretty huge at the moment, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, Convert to a Smart Object. That way I can scale this image and add filters to it without losing any information. So I do have to kind of scale this down a little bit. I tend to just sort of shuffle it back and forward, but there are quicker ways of doing it. We can simply type in a percentage up here. But for now, I'm just going to stick with this, and I'm going to kind of sit him off to one side here. Now, one thing you notice is I just want to bring it up so I kind of want the top of his head kind of touching. I feel like that makes the effect a bit easier and a bit more sort of sharper. The next thing I'm going to do is go into this background here. I'm going to just simply Control A or Command A. I'm going to edit, copy again. The other thing too is if you have these images saved, you can go to File and Place to insert these images. But I'm just going to click on the background layer and paste. And once again, I'm going to hit Control T. So when I resized that image before, I forgot to mention, Edit, Free Transform, or Control T, or Command T. This time I will type in 30% up the top here, so I'm going to go 30%, and you'll see it's linked, so it's all the same size. I hit Enter, and then I'm just going to sort of like hit Control. I'm going to hit my brush, hit Control, and just sort of move this in place. Now it's a bit small, not a big deal. I'm just going to expand it again, Control T. Now I can either do it this way. I hit Control T, Free Transform. I can just move that little corner, or if I hold down Alt, it'll actually move from the center. So we've got our pieces in place, and it's still not quite what we want, but you get the idea. What I want to do now, I want to pick two colors. Now I want two really opposing colors, so I'm going to say pick a red, nice strong red over here, and then underneath I'm going to pick a blue. So I've got a red and a blue here. My brush is enormous, so I'm just going to bring that down. The red and a blue here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer. I'm just going to call this one red. You don't have to name it if you don't want to. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my polygon lasso, and I'm actually going to go right through the middle of our subject, right where it connects up so we don't see any lines. And I'm going to just select this left side here, get my paint bucket tool on the left here, and pop that red on that side. I'm then going to go to Select and Inverse Selection, so we select the opposite side, create a new layer. I'm going to call it blue. I'm going to switch, put the blue in the foreground, and then get my paint bucket and paste in there. So what I can do now is I can actually use these to sort of tint the color of this background. So I'm going to actually go in, I'm going to say Color, and on here, up again on the Layers palette. If you don't see your Layers palette, head to Window and Layers. And I'm also going to change the blend mode to color again. So now we have these two colors here in the background. And the next thing I want to do is actually want to sort of tint the face a little bit with the colors on that side to start to get this effect to take shape. And slowly we'll produce the light and the bits and pieces of the way to get the result we want. So I'm actually going to create a new layer above, and this time I'm going to call it blue light. And I'm going to hold down Alt between these two layers, and you'll see this little sort of icon here with the arrow. I'm going to click on that, and it's going to clip that to this layer. So now if I get my paintbrush and my blue, I can now draw, and it won't actually leave the subject even if I turn that off. So I can actually hold down Alt and remove that. We now see that it sits outside. So I'm going to hit Control Z to undo, but I'm actually going to hit Control A and delete all of that and start again. So I've got my brush here. I'm going to make it quite large, and I'm going to put the hardness right down. And I might even bring the flow down just about halfway or so and just start painting in this color. And I want to look at the contour of the face and think, where would that light be shining? And kind of follow that a little bit along here. Now I can make my brush bigger and smaller and hit some other areas like the nose. And you'll see now we've kind of got like a blue sort of highlight on one side. Now you can play with what works best depending on your image, but from lighten down to light and color, these are the blend modes that will actually add light to the image. Color dodge will probably be the best one for this job, so I'm going to do that, and I can adjust the opacity until I'm happy. It's a little bit noisy, so I'm going to bring it down a bit. And then I'm going to switch over here to red, add another layer, hold down Alt again above this layer, and it will sort of follow that clip down to here. And I'll call this one, by double clicking on the name, I'll click red light. You can also just right click and rename this, but there's that many options here. I prefer to just simply double click on the name, fix that typo. And I'm going to make my brush a bit bigger this time because we've got so much more of this side of the face showing. So I'm going to add my red in along this sort of direction and just sort of try and follow the contours of the face. Maybe add a little bit here and go from there. Now you might find this is a little harsh, so you can also knock the flow back even further and get a more gradual sort of effect, and just simply paint in where you think is best. Be a little bit artistic about this, and again, somewhere between lighten and light and color, we want to choose which one we think looks best. So I generally like color dodge, and I'm going to drag that back. So you can see it's already starting to look the way we want it to look. And what I'm actually going to do now is there's a little bit too much color, I think, on the subject, so I'm going to click on the image itself. I'm going to go to filters and I'm going to go to image and adjustments, not filters, image and adjustments. I'm going to go to hue and saturation. I'm going to bring that saturation down a bit so we get a bit more of a really high color effect. Oops, cancel.
Hello there.
So doing that, and because we have this as a smart layer, I can turn that on or off, and I can adjust it by double clicking on the filter to get different effects depending on what I'm looking for. But so far it's starting to look pretty good. Now in order to actually get a deeper look to this, it's already starting to look the way we want it to, we can do a few different things. One thing you can also do is even add in some opposing on the opposite sides. So if I actually take the red light over here, I can bring my brush size down. I can put some on the eye if I want to, and do a few different weird effects like that. And you can have some opposing sort of bits and pieces in there if you really want to mix that up. But for the sake of simplicity, we'll leave it for this video. We'll leave it the way it is. But depending on what you do, I've noticed sometimes, especially on the Star Wars Theory thumbnails I referenced, sometimes the eyes will be lit up a certain color as well. But you can go in with your eraser and remove anything you want to. But the next step is you actually want to add a really big highlight around the image. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to add another layer on top of this. And I'm going to once again hold Alt to clip it to the image. And I'm going to choose, this time I'm going to choose white. So these colors now, we've sort of put what we want in there, but if you want to save them for reference, you can click on them and just sort of copy this hash code. But if you're choosing strong colors, it should be easy enough to find, or you can simply click on your layer down here, bring it up to normal, and then use your color picker to get them back later if you want the exact same color. But for now, we'll go back to color, back up to our top layer. I'm going to call this one white, and I'm going to make this top sort of left color swatch white. And because we have this all clipped down to this layer, if I start painting on the inside, I'll make my brush a bit bigger, we get this highlight coming down on the right. And it doesn't look very good at the moment, but we're going to get to that and fix it up. So the flow, I might bring the flow up a little bit so we get more of an intense color. And we just want to kind of draw around the edge of the subject. And once again, if we're sort of showing a little bit more surface, I would tend to go into the surface a bit. Now, you can, like I said before, you can adjust the flow, but if you get something like this, and you don't want to have to keep redoing it until you're happy with it, you can just simply get your eraser on the left over here, bring the size up, and just kind of dab away and soften it up that way. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this white light, also put it to color dodge. And then I'm going to just bring it back a little until we get what we want. I can also experiment with linear dodge and a few other things to get that looking the way I want it to. Now if I want to experiment, I can also bring this down under the red light and see what kind of effect it has. So you can actually play with the order until, because every image is different, you're going to want to actually see what kind of result you get. This one, it doesn't look too good there, so I'll move it back up. And you see we start to get this real sort of hard highlight on the top. Now once again, I do think color dodge is going to be best for this, and I'm just going to simply use my eraser, we'll bring the size down a bit, and we'll touch this up until we're happy with it. Move it back down. So I've popped it under the layer again, and I'm actually going to just play with the opacity until we get something we're happy with. So that's pretty good there. And then we're going to do the same again. So you'll probably find the best results will be by putting the white under the layer, but it's always worth trying on top. So I'm going to add another layer. And because I've added it in between these clipped layers, it has automatically clipped it. So I'm going to say white light again. But this time I'll drag it under the blue and we'll start under the blue. So I'll go here, once again with my paintbrush tool, and paint in some white. And really highlight the edge of the subject. And this helps to lift it off the background, so it really stands out. And you notice we've got a bit of a hard edge here, but we're going to fix that in a minute. Once again, I can get my eraser and kind of just touch things up a little bit. One thing I also like to do is I think about things like objects such as noses that will actually stick out. And once again, that way we're following the contour of the face a little bit. That way we've got this sort of area here as well. And then once again, get that eraser out, touch it up. So now we've got a nice hard highlight there. I can bring that down. Keep in mind, I haven't actually added color dodge to this, so you can also play with these blending modes. There is no sort of hard way to do it. There's no sort of set way. You just pick the mode that works best until you get the result you're after. But I'm pretty happy with that highlight for now. The next step I want to do is, the background's just a little bit too sort of like consistent, if you know what I mean. It can be a little bit hard to actually, we want to get a lot of depth in that. So we're actually going to go now down. And we're going to click on the background image and create another layer above it. And all we're going to do is we're going to get our white again, get a nice large brush. We're going to add a bit more of a glow around our subject. Once again, we're going to do this by hand a little bit. So I'm going to add this in by painting it in and just adding a bit of light so it really stands out, like it's glowing there. And once again, we can play with that opacity if we want to bring that down or up. And our subject kind of really stands out now. Once again, we can try and play with the layer blend mode. Do things that way. And then we're going to add another layer. So this one I would say is highlight, so I would say light. And then I'd add another layer on top, and I'd call this layer dark. Whoops. Click. Dark. And then I would actually go for a black. So click on here and make that black. And I would once again increase the size of the brush, maybe not quite that large. And I would just start painting in a bit more darkness. So we get a little bit more depth Now, keeping in mind this is behind the colors, so that way the tinting looks nice. If I bring this up above, it can look a little bit sort of mixed up. So we're just going to paint in the darkness. And once again, you can use your own preference as to what you think looks best. And then you get this cool glow effect around. That's what adds that depth in there. And on top of that, if you want to add in a bit of a light effect, which some of these images do, that's what I can go to this image here. Sorry, this image here. Control A, edit and copy. Come back, edit, paste. And I can move this around to sort of get the effect I'm after. And you can see it's already keeping the colors in place. So maybe I want to keep it about here. I can add a color dodge to it, and I can just bring that down because it's a little bit intense. And get like a bit of a glow effect that way. Once again, play with some of the other blending modes you have here to see what effects you can get. Lighter color dodge, and just have a play. Let's see what kind of results you get. Now we get this cool sort of glow effect. I can move it around until I'm happy with how it looks. So now we have this 2-color image, and I think it looks pretty cool. And once again, if we had a Star Wars character in there, it would probably be a little bit more cool, but you get the idea. Now, I want to add in a bit of text. So in order to get this text to stand out in the same way, all I do now, I'm going to click this text tool over here. I'm going to type something pretty basic. So I'm just going to say click here for the sake of the video, nothing too extreme. Now this text is pretty small. I'm going to actually go edit, free transform, or Control T, make that nice and large. And the black doesn't really work, so I'm going to change the color to white. And now you'll notice it is a little bit difficult to read, but what we're going to do is we're going to right click on this text, and I'm going to bring it up above everything. Move it to the top, have the text layer right at the top. I'm going to right click and go to blending options, or you can actually just go to the far right and double click to get your blending options that way. So it's a bit hard, we can't really see what we're doing without moving this around a bit, but I'm going to just sort of cancel for a sec, and I'm going to zoom out and just kind of move this image, make it so we're like that. Double click, and we kind of see some of the text over here. So what I'm actually going to do now is add in a drop shadow. Now you might think we're looking for more of a glow, but the reason I like drop shadows is because I can layer them. Now we can add in one drop shadow if it looks pretty good. I can also drag this, I can drag it around pretty easily, but we don't necessarily want the black. Unless you like that effect, you can actually run with that. But we're going to change the blend mode. Make sure the blend mode is set to normal. And we're going to click on here, and we're going to choose one of these dark blues off in the corner, so we get a little bit more highlight around the text. Click OK, and I'm going to just bring the distance down, the spread down a little bit, and I'm just going to really downplay it, bring that opacity down, just so we've got a light shadow there, just to sort of get around that text and make it more easier to read. Now over here next to drop shadow, you see a plus button. If I click on that, scroll down, I've got two of the same effect now. If I click on this bottom drop shadow, I can now click again, choose one of the brighter blues. I can adjust it until I pick a blue which I think is really nice and bright, so I think maybe this here. And this time I actually want to make the spread and the size a bit bigger until I'm pretty happy with it. I'll change the blend mode from normal to color dodge, or maybe even linear dodge. Once again, you'll need to see what suits you best. Play with that effect. You might find having the spread up and the size down works a bit better, but it's a little bit hard, so we'll bring that back. But one thing to keep in mind is you need to make sure it's legible. If this is not showing up, we can bring back over to here, click on this top drop shadow, and bring the opacity up a bit to make it stand out a bit better. We can even spread it out a little bit. Just play with it until you're happy, but the main thing is we have a little bit of an outline, and then we also have that glow. So we go back down to the second drop shadow, work on that glow, soften it up a bit, click OK, and then we can position it as we want. Now another thing too is if we do have this here, you can do this in whatever way you want. There's obviously probably better fonts and better words to choose, but for the sake of the video, this kind of does the trick. Now, if you still find that's a bit hard, you can go back down to your layers panel, find where you added in this glow earlier, get your eraser out, and just make it a bit bigger, and just kind of dab around the text to remove some of that light that you don't want. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. That is how we can create that sort of two color effect. Obviously, this is not necessarily the way that Star Wars Theory does it, but this is just the way I would do it if I was starting to use that effect more often. Otherwise, yeah, if you have any thoughts or comments, please leave them below. And otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.